Welcome to the Secrets of Personal Injury Law with Colin Bober.
Hello and welcome to the Secrets of Personal Injury Law with Colin Bober. Colin is a personal injury attorney who has represented over 4,000 clients with a gross settlement recovery of over $50 million. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and today's episode is all about fighting for fair compensation and the challenges of emotional distress claims. Colin, good to see you.
Happy to be here.
All right. Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about some damages here. Particularly, we're going to talk about the non-economic damages and particularly the emotional distress side of things. So we've already discussed economic damages. I don't want to forget anything. So real quick, what are the economic damages? What are the list?
Well, easy thing to remember, economic damages are something you can easily calculate. So it can be your medical expenses, it can be your lost wages, it can be anything out-of-pocket expenses, whether they're medical or not. Anything that you can put a dollar figure on is the easiest way to think about that.
And non-economical or anything like more on the emotional side, the pain and suffering side, things like that.
Correct.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the non-economic side because, we've talked a little bit about how difficult it is sometimes to prove that. What factors influence what compensation a victim would receive for things like pain and suffering or emotional distress?
Emotional distress is usually related to, severe accidents where, they're super traumatic versus I wouldn't diminish anybody's claim, but I would say that there are levels of claims where if somebody just gets rear-ended in a neighborhood is different than somebody getting hit by a drunk driver at 60 miles an hour.
Sure.
So I wouldn't diminish anybody's experience, but I would say that there's a difference. So if you have something that's super traumatic, like a drunk driver, it's reasonable to expect that you're going to have some post-traumatic stress disorder, which may lend itself to I have trouble sleeping, I have trouble concentrating, I have nightmares, I have anxiety on the road, I don't want to get in the car, it's affecting my relationship with my children, it's affecting my job, I can't focus. That's a laundry list of things you can go down, and to get that, that's all going to be in your medical records because if you do go get checked out by a doctor, which you obviously should if you have those experiences, it's in your best interest to be very candid with your doctor. Mm-hmm. It's not like one of those situations where you're like, be careful what you say because you can mess it up. No, this is about you and your health. You need to be candid so you can get the right care and service to make sure you're taken care of on the back end, whatever happens with your case, right? Mm-hmm. So that's where the documentation begins. Now, after that, the doctor may recommend some counseling. Maybe you do need some counseling for PTSD. Maybe you need medication for anxiety. Maybe you need something to help you focus at work. That's where it all begins. That's where the documentation begins to help to facilitate those types of claims.
I feel like I know not a lot, they don't often go to jury trials, but I feel like, we're getting better as a society as far as, mental issues and emotional issues and PTSD and things like that. But I still think that there's a stigma around that, whether it's, oh, they're just trying to get more money or things like that. Does that prove to be a challenge for you, like to overcome that sort of stigma that's surrounding emotional issues like this?
No, not really, because it's all about how you present the information.
Right.
You can tell if somebody's just motivated monetarily versus somebody who's a single mom of 3 kids and has to take care of them while she's trying to do her daily job alone, take care of the house and things like that. There is a level of genuineness that comes from that versus somebody who says, this ruined my life and you owe me money. I mean, some people will be very overt about that. So there is a stigma based on the way the information is presented. If mom is deposed and comes off as genuine, then the insurance company says she's going to come off really genuine in front of a jury. We need to offer her more money or we need to settle. If they come off in any form, whether it's a written statement, a deposition, mediation, whatever, if they come off and they look like they are monetarily motivated, then that puts them in a worse position. It's not 100% detrimental, I wouldn't say, but it doesn't do you any favors by coming off as you're motivated by monetary gain. So no, I wouldn't say there was a stigma per se, but it all depends on how the claimant comes off.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think we've talked about this a little bit on the show before. You and I are big football fans, and obviously head injuries, traumatic brain injuries, TBIs as they call them, and CTE is a big deal. When you have, the mental side of things is a little different than the physical side, a little different to prove. Does that sort of thing fall under economic or non-economic?
Both.
Interesting.
Yes, because if you say that you believe that you have a traumatic brain injury, you normally would have to do CT or MRI of the brain. Okay, well, if you have to do either one of those things, you've incurred an economic expense for the MRI. And depending on what the findings are, whether they diagnose you as just post-concussive syndrome that they give you some medication for, and over a couple of weeks they resolve, then that still lends itself to pain and suffering. You have a concussion for several weeks. If they do additional testing to confirm that you have a traumatic brain injury will not resolve in several weeks. It could be a long-lasting thing, which lends itself to additional therapy in the future and pain and suffering, whether you have a loss of function or cognitive abilities. That lends itself to non-economic pain and suffering and mental anguish.
Going back to my football analogy, I mean, we've seen players have lifelong issues from traumatic brain injuries. Granted, it's a little different because they're getting hit more times and it's a progressive thing. But I mean, how do you, in a case where someone's got a severe traumatic brain injury, are you able to get them sort of like a longer compensation package because of the fact that their life is forever altered?
Unfortunately, like we said many times before, the recovery is limited by the policy, mostly. Now, if you have a commercial accident where the policy limits are $500,000 to $1 million, you have more chances of recovery. If you get hit by somebody with State Farm and State Farm comes in and says, yeah, here's our policy limit of $30,000, no question. And then the person that you want to sue for more doesn't have any assets to collect on, you can get a judgment for $30,000 plus, but you'll never see the money.
Right. Yeah.
So yes, the damage model can articulate a better compensation structure or gross settlement. But then, as we said in a previous podcast, even though you have that piece of paper saying that you're owed money, how are you going to get it? And there is a limitation there depending on who you got hit by.
Right. Yeah. I think we've talked about that before. If you're going to get hit by a rich person.
Well, yeah. I mean, and that's the disservice about attorney advertising too. I got my client, $6 million. Okay. Does that mean that you got a verdict for $6 million or the client actually got $6 million?
Yeah. Big difference.
Nobody knows the answer to that.
Right.
So you have to be careful. And that's why we have to do these podcasts to make sure that we are articulating what is said and what is actually collectible, because those are two different things.
What are some of the biggest challenges you face in getting fair compensation for emotional distress?
Oh, well, you know how insurance companies, the accident wasn't that bad. Or the most popular is, if your client needed treatment, they would have gotten it. Okay. But my client wouldn't need treatment if they hadn't got hit by your insurer.
Yeah, that's sort of
Yeah. So I don't really care what you think. Okay. The bottom line is, they have a documented injury, they're recommended for treatment, and the only way you're going to get your insured off the hook is if you give them a settlement worth taking. That's all I want to talk about. I don't care about an adjuster's personal feelings. I don't care about an adjuster's personal experience. I don't care. The question is, at the end of the day, you caused it. You don't deny that you caused it. In order to indemnify your insured, which is your job, how much are you going to compensate this claimant? Because unfortunately, the way the law works is the only way you can be compensated is monetarily. And you and I both know that regardless of the severity of the injury or whatever, on which side you come on, there's never enough money to make somebody feel like they were made whole.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the only thing that we want to be talking about. We can go and dumpster dive about the medical bills and what they say and what the impacts are. But at the end of the day, the question for the insurance company is, how much are you going to pay to make this claimant feel whole and indemnify your insured? That's it.
It's tough because emotional distress, some of these non-economic damages, I feel it's got to be tough to prove some of it that you can't look at through a doctor's lens or something. Like, for example, I mean, I think you mentioned something about bringing on like someone's mother or something like that. Do you often get depositions or statements from family members to help solidify a case of emotional distress?
You can absolutely use whatever resources you think are relevant to tell the story, but the best way to do that is to get it from the claimant's mouth, because only their testimony is admissible. The rest of it's hearsay, right?
So does it strengthen the case?
It can. It just depends on which part of the case it is applied to.
Right.
Because the only person who's entitled to damages is the claimant. Now the exception to that rule is if the claimant can no longer articulate for themselves. Then you only have the testimony from other people to explain what they were like and what they're like now. right? But the best thing to do is to get it from the horse's mouth. And you're the claimant. You know your body best. You know what you used to do. You know what you can't do now. What is that? And tell that in your own words, because I can tell that. I can say, but I'm a lawyer. I have to focus on the technicalities, and my legalese doesn't necessarily come out as presentable to tell that that person's story any better than they can tell it themselves. Which is why in previous podcasts we talked about victim impact statements. The victim impact statements are designed to give the claimant the opportunity to tell their own story in their own words. Because if it goes to a jury trial, you've got 6 to 12 people sitting on a jury who've never been on a jury before, and they know nothing about you. So who do you want to tell your story better, you or me? And I'm willing to bet that nine times out of 10, it's probably going to be better if the claimant does it themselves.
Absolutely. Going back to some, a TBI or a concussion, you can have, you could easily have a situation where the car is not in bad shape. The person isn't physically damaged in any other way, but they crack their head and have some issues, mental issues. Do you get those situations much? And how difficult is it to prove something like that when there's not other factors around that make it more obvious?
Well, that kind of goes back to what we said before, is that property damage is not related to the bodily injury, right?
Right.
Because what you just described, there's no damage to the car, but they cracked their head on the window, right? That's exactly why they're not related, because that happens. And so sometimes the insurance company will admit liability, say, yeah, we hit your client, but we're denying the bodily injury portion of the claim because we don't believe your client could have been injured. So then you have to do the discovery. You have to get testimony from the client. You have to get testimony from the doctor that evaluated them to have a licensed professional basically articulate that based on their medical opinion that the injury and the accident are related. And that usually requires litigation, because right before litigation, the adjuster doesn't care. And and to be clear, just to be fair to insurance adjusters, and that's not really my style.
Whoa, wait. This is a monumental moment in this podcast history. So
I know. That's why I had to preface it, because insurance adjusters, truly speaking, they say some dumb stuff, and I'm not going to deny that. But the reality of the situation is they only give the claimant the authority that they themselves were given, right? So your offer may be terrible from your adjuster, and you may hate it. You can beat on that adjuster as much as you want, but they can't give you any more money than the authority that they were already given. Which is why when an attorney's involved, we send the letter of representation, and it goes to a different adjuster with more authority. So back in the beginning of the podcast, we said, why do you want an attorney? At a minimum, it's because just to get him to the right person, right? So, be nice to your adjuster to the extent that you can, as long as they're not spilling a bunch of BS. But just know that they can only give you the offer that they've been given from their management.
When you first talk to a client, what kind of questions do you ask to determine the non-economic damages?
Similar to what I had already described to you is, first of all, it's pretty in-depth. It's give me your injuries now. Then on top of that, I want to know if you've had any other injuries or claims within the last 10 years. Have you had any work injuries? Have you had any car accidents? Have you had any slip and falls? Anything like that, because I want to know if you have something that's already going on that's been exacerbated by the accident you were just in.
Okay, that changes your approach, or it changes what the insurance company's approach is, I would imagine.
Because the insurance company is they can do what's called an ISO search, which is basically a search of all your insurance claims over a certain period of time. So if you've had 5 accidents in the last 10 years, they're going to say, well, we're not denying that we hit your insured or your client, but we are denying that we caused these injuries. To which the reply is, if I know that you had 5 accidents in the last 10 years, I'm not going to argue that the insurance company or the driver caused it. I'm going to argue that you're an eggshell plaintiff, meaning that you had a pre-existing injury which this accident made worse, right? So it helps me craft my argument so I don't look stupid making an argument that says the driver caused it when they didn't cause it, they just made it worse. Yeah. So you have to do that in good faith as an attorney too, to make sure that you're not perpetuating a claim that is not justifiable, right? There's a duty on the attorney to make sure that we're only presenting legitimate claims. Right. And that requires that research. So I want to know your claim history, whether it was a car accident, work injury, or whatever. And I want to know, okay, you said you have pain in your neck. Do you have any radiating pain down your arm? Do you have trouble sleeping? Does it interact or impact your ability to take care of your children? Those details of similar things that you would say in your victim impact statement, I'm going to ask you up front. And I'm doing that because when you're in pain, you're probably not paying attention to how it impacts you. You're just paying attention to the fact that you're in pain.
Right. Yeah.
Right. But you're probably not noticing that you have radiculopathy down your arm. You're probably not noticing that you're a little hostile to your children because you're in pain. Nobody blames you for that, but you're not paying attention to that, which is why I'm asking you that, to put it on your radar, to notate that, so you do pay attention to it, so we can have it documented in a victim impact statement or your medical records.
Yeah.
That's where it all comes. That's where it all began. You have to ask probing questions because people who've never been in an accident before don't know that that's what they need to think about.
Right. Yeah, you're right. Because your pain can make you, you're going to be very focused on your pain. It can make you kind of, a little cloudy about other things, not paying attention to other things. We've all been there.
Right. We've had people that have simply said, my neck and my back hurt 100%. I expect that. What else? Right. Because what I want them to do is to flesh it out with them, get them to say it in their own words. I don't want to lead them down a path.
Right.
I just say, what else? Okay. And then what they do is they say, you know what? I do have these issues. I do have headaches. I do have blurry vision, which then they take to their doctor and say, these are my issues, which lends itself to additional testing to determine what those injuries truly develop to be, which then in turn turn into hopefully adequate compensation to make them feel like they've been made whole. It's a lot of unpacking and development, but it starts at the beginning.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I can see that how it's a lot of unpacking at the beginning. You got to ask the right questions for sure. All right. Well, thank you for tuning in to the Secrets of Personal Injury Law with Colin Bober. To connect with Colin and his team, visit boberlawfirm.com. And don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel and leave us a review. Colin, great seeing you again. Thanks so much for all the insight.
I enjoyed it. Thanks.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.